Hi, I'm Melanie, and you're about to watch a message that was preached here at Calvary Fellowship in Miramar, Florida. At Calvary, we exist to help you take your next step in your relationship with God, and we pray that this message helps you do just that.
All right, how's everybody doing? Well, we are glad that you're here. I appreciate all of you guys that braved the rain to be here. I know some of you guys are tired because you were up early yesterday watching the royal wedding, which I don't even understand that. I really don't. I don't understand people watching a wedding they were not invited to. I don't even want to go to the weddings I am invited to. So it's just a weird thing. And I'll tell you what else is weird is once I found out that I have so many thoughts on this wedding, and I can't talk about all of them, but the girl that got Megan, that girl that got married, and the other guy, whatever his name is, and I found out that she was married before. And I don't know why. All I've been thinking about is that guy. All I've been thinking about this whole wedding is that guy. And I just, because at some point, the relationship ended. And she's like, that's it. I'm out of here. I'm going to find my prince. He's, good luck with that. And here we are. It's just so weird. And the guy can't talk any smack because, what is he going to say? Anyway, it's just so weird. Anyway, I have so many thoughts on this. And at some point, we're going to do a proper exegesis of all this, but I can't right now. But I will say this. When I first started teaching, this is now 21 years ago, I felt called to teach, and then at the church I was at, they gave me my first teaching assignment, which was, they gave me a 4-week class in the book of Jude. Now, Jude is tucked all the way at the end of the New Testament, right before Revelation, is this little 1-chapter book called Jude. And so they gave me 4 weeks to teach on. It was on a Monday night. And what happened with these classes is you would get maybe 20 or 30 people would sign up, and then you'd lose half the people over the course of the 4 weeks, and that was kind of the typical thing. Well, I started with about 30 people, and there was over 50 people by the end of it. So I had kind of the reverse thing, is that more people were showing up as I was teaching, and so the people were happy about that. But one of the things that they did was that they would do these evaluations at the end. They were anonymous evaluations, and they would evaluate the speaker, they'd evaluate the topic and what other topics would you like to see in the future and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, after the 4th class, I collect all the evaluations after they're done, and I'm looking through all of them, right? And they're, Bob's so funny, Bob's so insightful, Bob's so handsome, a lot of it. I may have written that last one, but I was in the class too. And so they're going through the whole thing, right? And then I get one. And the guy is not so nice. And, his whole thing is, he says, the problem, Bob's a good teacher, but he tells way too many stories, and he wastes too much time telling stories. And which, by the way, I mean, if you want, this is going on 20 years. The thing that people like most about my teaching, Pastor Rob, I love your stories. They relate so much to my life. Is the thing that people like the most is usually generally the critique that people have, and that is, I tell too many stories. And so I'm going to give you a little spoiler alert, and that isn't going to change. But I'll tell you what, I was trying to figure out who that was. And so I couldn't, because it was all anonymous, and then people were handwriting. So I remember I had all the sign-in forms, and everyone signing in to the class. You already know where I'm going with this. And I went full CSI on this, and I'm trying to see this one guy, how he draws his R's, and I'm look, that matches how he writes R's. It really shows a lot of rage with the way they turn. I don't know how people, I'm telling you, there's a profession to do this. See the loop there? That means he has a lot of anger, whatever, who knows? And so anyway, but that was the whole thing. And so listen, spoiler alert, stories aren't going to change. And the other thing is that, there's another person who told a lot of stories, and that was his primary method of teaching. His name was Jesus. And so I'm okay being lumped in with him as far as being a storyteller. And the reality is, and I tell you this because storytelling is the primary way that lessons were taught, that information was transferred in the Eastern culture of the Bible. In the Western culture that we live in, we think in terms of facts and figures, but that is totally foreign to the culture of the Bible. So I say that once again because we started the series last week called The Meaning of Everything, and we're looking at the book of Ecclesiastes. The word Ecclesiastes, if you weren't with us, is a Latin term that comes from the translation of a Hebrew term, if you're following that little trail. But the Hebrew term, the word Ecclesiastes in Hebrew is the Hebrew word Koheleth, which is what the book is named in Hebrew. And that word simply means the teacher or the preacher. And that is what this book is called. It's about the preacher. It's about Solomon. Solomon is telling us a story. That's the means by which information was transferred in that culture. And so he's going to tell us his journey that God has shown him about what life is all about. What is the meaning of life? What are the things that we should invest in, not invest in, avoid, make sure that we don't miss? And he's not going to tell us the punchline until the end of the story so it doesn't lose its power. But what he's going to do is he's going to show us along the way, hey, here are some things that you should do. Here are some things that you shouldn't do. And what he's going to do is he's looking at his life in many ways like an experiment. And he's going to say, hey, look, this is what I did to try to find what gives life meaning, what makes life fulfilling, what gives life purpose. And he's going to take us into his lab and show us what works and what doesn't. And he's going to give us these three areas to look at. And I think it's an important thing for us as we look at his research. Because really, you can live your life one of three ways, right? You can either not learn from your mistakes, which is the worst way to live. You can learn from your mistakes, which is better. The best way to live is to learn from the mistakes of other people so that you can get all the wisdom and avoid a lot of the pain along the way. And so Solomon is going to tell us, hey, this is what I've learned, and we are wise to listen to him. So if you have your Bible, I'd love for you to open with me to the book of Ecclesiastes chapter 2, which is where we're going to be. If not, you can grab your outline, and we're going to start. All the verses that we're going to cover are going to be in there. But here's what he says. He says, I said in my heart, come now, and I will test you with mirth or gladness, and therefore enjoy pleasure. But surely this also was vanity. I said of laughter, madness, and of mirth, what does it accomplish? I searched in my heart how to gratify my flesh with wine, while guiding my heart with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly, that I might see what was good for the sons of men to do under heaven all the days of their lives. And I made my works great. I built myself houses and planted myself vineyards. I made myself gardens and orchards, and I planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made myself water pools from which to water the growing trees of the grove. I acquired male and female servants and had servants born in my house. Yes, I had greater possessions of herds and flocks than any who were before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and special treasures of kings in the provinces. I acquired male and female singers, the delights of the sons of men, and musical instruments of all kind. So I became great and excelled more than all who were in Jerusalem before me. And also my wisdom remained with me. Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure. For my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and this was my reward from all my labor. And then I looked at all the works that my hands had done, and all the labor with which I had toiled. And indeed, this was all vanity and grasping for the wind, and there was no profit under the sun. Now, if you pause there and give me your attention, Solomon's looking for meaning. He's looking for purpose and joy. And what he's going to find is, in this first section, if you're taking notes, is that I need to find meaning. We need to find meaning beyond activity. Beyond activity. What's amazing to me in this passage is that sometimes the route that we go to find joy, to find meaning or fulfillment in any area, but Solomon goes in this first route, and it's like he just tops whatever we might do. And he starts the experiment by deciding that he's going to live for pleasure. And it works for a season, and he starts doing all of these things that he thinks are going to bring him meaning and joy. And so he doesn't just do what a lot of people do is, oh, I'm going to buy some wine. That's going to make me happy. No, he goes far beyond that. He doesn't just buy a bottle of wine. He plants a vineyard and an orchard so that he can have as much wine as he wants. He doesn't do what a lot of guys do, and that is, I'm going to build a shed or a man cave. No, he decides to become a general contractor. And he's going to start building houses. In fact, to this day, south of Jerusalem, there's a whole area that are called Solomon's Pools, because these are the areas that he quarried rock, stone, dirt for all of his building projects. And, Solomon it's not like, oh, I'm going to hire someone to make life easier, to help around the house. Solomon had so many servants in his house that he says, I had male and female servants so many that children were born in my house, that there was like this little subculture of society that was living, that were serving Solomon, that were this men and women were meeting, falling in love, getting married, having children, all in the home of Solomon. You see, you want to buy an album or download an album on Apple Music or stream it on Spotify. He didn't download music. He just bought the band. That's what he says. I acquired male and female singers. You like Coldplay? He bought Coldplay. And he's like, you're going to play Yellow until I'm sick of it. And that's what he does. And he says, and I became great. And I excelled more than anyone who was before me, and I still had my wisdom. And what he means by that is that he wasn't overtaken by it. He's still observing it as an experiment. And that's why in verses 10 and 11, he looks on it, and he's saying, I'm seeing this as my reward, and does it work or does it not work? And he says, I had a good time. I had a good time, man. The band played my favorite song until I was sick of that song. And we had the party, and every night, and then the party got bigger, and then the parties got more fun, and the parties got so fun to the point where fun wasn't even fun anymore. And then, the thing, even if you're just a casual reader of the Bible, if you know about Solomon, you know that one of the things that he did in his overindulgence was relationships. And that if you look in the text that we gave you, it says that Solomon had 700 wives. 300 concubines. It's there in the text in 1 Kings 11. And that was what turned his heart away from God. And I want you to think about this for a minute, right? 1,000 women, right? 700 wives, 300 concubines were like living girlfriends, basically, all at Solomon's disposal. And I was thinking about this the other day. Do I know 1,000 people? Right? And if I do, I probably do know 1,000 people. But do I know all their names? And because sometimes, you know how it is. Like sometimes you know someone by face, but you don't remember their name, right? That happens. You're going through, the supermarket or something, you see somebody, and basically the longer the hay, when you see them, the less likely you know their name. That's usually how it works. Because if it's like Joe, you're like, hey, Joe. But if you don't remember Joe's name, you're like, hey. Right? You're not really sure. And especially if we're Christians, we have we can do a couple other things. We're like, hey, brother. Hey, bro, what's up? We can do that. And so, but Solomon, listen, he has 1,000 women. And I'm sorry. But I'm thinking that he probably was like a little shaky on a couple of their names. And he's like, hey, spouse, I'm your concubine. What's up, bine? Or whatever you say, concu, whatever it is. And there's just, and then I'm thinking as well with what is the selection process? I don't know if this is like, one night with Solomon and then we work on a 2.5 year, almost 3-year rotation. I'm not sure how this works. And so I'm trying to think through. And so I'm not Solomon. If I were, and I'm not saying I want 1,000 wives, I can barely handle the one I have. And so, I didn't say that in the service she was in, funny enough. But it's true. But here's what happens is that I'm thinking that there had to be, if I were Solomon, I would have like a human resources person just handling the wife situation. Because how are you going to know who you're going to be with that night? So I'm thinking that there's a standing appointment at, let's just say, 4 p.m. when the workday is winding down. And this guy would come in, King, I know you're busy. Can we talk about this evening's entertainment? And yeah, sure, great. Okay, so I just want to know what you're interested in tonight. Do you want a brunette? Do you want a redhead? Do you want a blonde? And he's like, I don't know, blonde sounds good. Okay, perfect. Now, when you say blonde, are we talking platinum blonde, natural blonde, dirty blonde, dyed blonde? And he says, natural blonde. Okay, perfect. And now, when we say we've got a natural blonde, and so do you prefer blue eyes, green eyes, brown eyes? And he's like, well, do you have hazel eyes? So of course we have hazel eyes. We have a lot to choose from here. We just want you to be happy. And so listen, here's the point, is that Solomon did not have any fantasy that went unfulfilled. And yet he gets to the end of it, and his conclusion is that this way of living does not satisfy. That all of it is still vanity, that all of it is still grasping at the wind. And if you weren't with us last time, we talked about that word vanity, that it's the Hebrew word hebel. And that's not even a word. It's just a sound. It's just a sigh. That's all it is when he says that it's all vanity. It's meaningless. It's a sigh. It's nothing. And this is important for us to understand that are Christians, because what Solomon is not saying is that pleasure is bad. And I know there's plenty of Christians out there who say that it's bad, that it's only godly if it's painful and you're unhappy. There's lots of people. Are you really upset about this? Yes, then you're in God's will. And some people, they feel like it's only, if you're suffering, that's the only time you know you're right with God. But here's the thing. Everyone wants to be happy. And that's okay. That's by design. For us to seek joy, for us to seek happiness, for us to seek fulfillment, that is, we just simply go about it in different ways. That's really the challenge. There was a 16th century philosopher by the name of Blaise Pascal. Blaise Pascal was a French mathematician, physicist, inventor, writer, and theologian. Like, can we all say this is like the coolest guy ever to hang out with? This is what happens when you don't have Netflix in your life. You become an expert at a whole bunch of things. But anyway, so this is like the coolest guy ever. And here's what he wrote about this subject. He said, all men seek happiness. This is without exception. Whatever different means they employ, they all tend to this end. The cause of some going to war and of others avoiding it is the same desire in both, attended with different views. The will never takes the least step but to this object. This is the motive of every action of man, even of those who hang themselves. Think about this. This is what Blaise Pascal, this philosopher, is saying, that every person, every step, everything that they do is for the objective of being happy, of experiencing joy, even the person that ends their life. Because the person that ends their life, according to Pascal, is saying that the state of not being alive will be happier than the state that I'm in right now. Listen, that's powerful. And his observation is that everyone wants to be happy. From the moment that we're born, we're seeking joy. Now, different quote. C.S. Lewis. Some of you're familiar with him. You're familiar with the Chronicles of Narnia. But that wasn't his greatest gift to the church. His greatest gift to the church was his body of work. His book, Mere Christianity, is probably one of the 5 best books I've ever read. I highly recommend every person read it. But he wrote a book called The Weight of Glory. And The Weight of Glory is a collection of essays and lectures that he gave on different subjects about the Christian faith. And here's what he says in this book on the same topic of joy and desire. He says, if there lurks in most modern minds the notion that to desire our own good and earnestly hope for the enjoyment of it is a bad thing, I submit that this notion crept in from Kant and the Stoics and has no part of the Christian faith. Now, pause there for a minute. Immanuel Kant was a 18th century philosopher who believed that suffering was more virtuous than joy. And so his philosophy was, if you were married to a person that was completely unbearable, there was more virtue in you staying with them than being married to someone that you love and enjoy being with. So that was that whole philosophy. If it's suffering, then you know it's of God and you're in God's will. If you're happy, then you're probably not. So anyway, so back to the quote. So he's saying this philosophy that joy is not good comes from that line of thinking. So here's where the thing continues. He says, indeed, if we consider the unblushing promises of reward and the unstaggering nature of the rewards promised in the Gospels, it would seem that our Lord finds our desires not too strong, but too weak. We are half-hearted creatures, fooling about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered to us, like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by an offer of a holiday at the sea. We are far too easily pleased. You see, the challenge that Solomon is saying, the challenge that Pascal is saying, the challenge that C.S. Lewis is saying is not that desire is bad. And it's not that we set our desire too high on what we want God to do in our lives, but that we set our sights too low. And that the things that we think will bring us meaning and purpose and joy are things that simply can't, because they're too lowly of a thing to bring us meaning and fulfillment. So I'll give you an example of this. And so I don't know if I'm guessing at some point you've been in the part of life where you've wanted a new phone, where you had your phone, and then you said, you know what, it'd be really make my life good as if I had the new phone. I was fine with my iPhone 7. I was fine with it until I saw the commercial for the iPhone 10. And that's when I realized that my life was totally incomplete. And I'm like, I have been living like an animal this whole time. And so I saw the commercial for the iPhone 10, prayed about it for like 20, 30 seconds, and then ordered it. And so I ordered the new phone, and then I found out that it was back ordered for 3 months. It was killing me. Anyway, so it probably ended up being like 6 weeks. But then I got this notification from Apple saying your phone has shipped. And all I could think about, my daughter Mia and I, we've been watching all these videos about what the phone can do, and I'm like, how have I lived? I mean, like, I've been using a phone that only has one camera. Can you believe that? It doesn't, I mean, like, seriously. I mean, one camera, really? And so, but now it has a double camera, and it has, the front-facing portrait mode. I mean, and I've taken like 4 pictures in portrait mode. I'm like, how did I live without this? And so anyway, so I'm waiting for the phone to show up, and then I get the date comes, and FedEx shows up, and I sign for it, and then I get it. And I'm so excited, and then Mia and I, we take it out of the box, and then it's in the cellophane, the little wrapper, and then we open that up. And then, Apple does such a good job in the presentation, and you know how the phone is like, it does a little like suction thing. So we open the thing up with the plastic, and we open the thing up. I'm so excited, and then when I open the thing up, I realize it's my wife's phone. And I'm like, oh. Hey, your phone's here, whatever. And it's not a big deal. Jesus said last will be first anyway. Go for it, take it. And so, nonetheless, because of how my life works, 20 minutes after that, I get an email from Apple that says, your phone just shipped. But it's now close to the weekend, so I don't get to wait 3 days, I have to wait 5 days. And then 5 days. And I'm open, and the same thing. Sign for it. Mia and I are getting ready. We open the thing up, and then whole thing, suction thing, and then I get the phone, then I do the transfer, and you know what? I don't feel any different. In fact, what's weird is it's the same phone, except it has one less button. So I'm paying more for less of a button. And I had no idea how much I would miss the home button. But I'm always, because now it opens the phone with my face. But unfortunately, it's not just my face. I have to make a particular face for my phone to actually even recognize me. So I'm out on Friday. I go out with my wife. I take her to this nice movie. We go out to the movies. I take her to this nice movie theater. But I have the ticket to the movie in my Apple Wallet thing. And then what happens is that my phone doesn't, I'm just like, that doesn't work for me. I have to go like this. I have to make the strangest face. So I'm in line at this really nice movie theater, and they're like, "Oh, sir, do you have a reservation?" Well, yes, of course I do. Oh, okay, you're here for the 7 o'clock show? Yeah, I am. Oh, can I see your ticket, please? Of course. And I gotta look like a convict, like I'm gonna stab someone, and then the thing opens up, and everyone is like, "What is wrong with this individual? This phone's gonna make me happy. Now I look crazy." And this is the challenge, right? But here's the thing, is that, listen, what Pascal says, what C.S. Lewis says, what Solomon says is all the same. It's not that we shouldn't experience joy or seek joy or try to eliminate desire. The problem is, the reason why it eludes us is not because we set our desire too high, but because we think the things that are gonna bring us joy and happiness are things that we set too low. You see, some people are under the impression that the elimination of desire is the road to godliness. Let me tell you something. The elimination of desire is not even Christianity. That's Buddhism. If you think that, you're in the wrong building. You know, but listen, the point that Solomon is making is that desire is good, but there's really only one place that we can go where there is the fulfillment of desire. And it's not in all of these little things that we try to do, because they can never deliver. He goes on in verse 12, and look at what he says. He makes it even more depressing. He says, then I turned myself to consider wisdom and madness and folly. For what can man do who succeeds the king? Only what has already been done. Then I saw that wisdom excels folly, as light excels darkness. The wise man's eyes are in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. Yet I perceived myself that the same event happens to them all. So I said in my heart, as it happens to the fool, it happens to me. So why then was I more wise? Then I said in my heart, this is also vanity. There is no more remembrance for the wise than the fool forever. Since all that now is will be forgotten in the days to come. And how does the wise man die? As the fool. Therefore I hated life, because the work that was done under the sun was distressing to me. For all is vanity and grasping for the wind. Then I hated all my labor which I had toiled under the sun, because I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he will be wise or a fool. Yet he will rule over all my labor, in which I have toiled, and in which I have shown myself wise under the sun. This also is vanity. Listen, second thing, I need to find purpose beyond expectations. I need to find meaning beyond activity, and then we find purpose beyond expectations. And here's what I mean by that. Solomon is now looking at everything from a different perspective. He was looking to find meaning by all of his activity, everything that he did. And then everything was built, and the orchards were laid out, and then the water system was built, and he's got his whole team of people that are working for him, and he's got all the buildings built. And now he's looking on the other side of that, and it's giving him a different perspective. And now he's saying, what do I do with all of this stuff? At some point, I'm going to turn this over to someone else. And who knows if they're going to be able to manage what's been built, or will they be a fool and all of it be destroyed? But see, what Solomon does, it's a bad thesis. You see, the hypothesis is wrong, because couldn't that have been said of his father David? His father David could have said, you know, I'm the one who had to fight Goliath. I had to fight the giants. I'm the one who had to run from an evil King Saul. And so how in the world could the king who comes after me have any wisdom whatsoever to rule? Because he is never going to have to struggle the way I had to struggle. But that was not David's hypothesis. David's hypothesis was this, that he was going to invest in his son so that his son would be wise. And you know what we read about Solomon? That he caused the nation to prosper. In this little vignette in 1 Kings chapter 4, we read this. It says this in your notes. He says, so Solomon's dominion extended over all the kingdoms west of the Euphrates River, from Tifsa to Gaza. And there was peace in all his borders. During the lifetime of Solomon, all Judah and Israel lived in peace and safety. And from Dan in the north to Beersheba in the south, each family had its own home and garden. And this little passage tells us so much about Solomon's reign, that the nation grew to its zenith of land acquisition, its zenith of wealth, and this robust economy reached so far that even the most common person was living in a home and had a garden in the backyard. And so here's what happens. Solomon was a completely different type of leader. David was the warrior type of leader. Solomon was a peacemaker. Solomon was the one that through wisdom expanded the borders of Israel beyond anything that he could see. Solomon simply says, this is what I've done, nobody else can do better. And so because of that, it's all downhill from here. It's just a bad way to think about it. And listen, we can all get there sometimes. I think about this at times. I think about this idea that there's going to come a point in time when I'm not the pastor of this church anymore. And listen, I'm not hoping it's not anytime soon, but because I plan to live to a minimum of 150. I recognize that someday it's going to happen. that I'm going to retire or whatnot, and someone else is going to take over. And see, the thing is that I remember starting this church in a living room with 5 people, and my wife and I, 7 of us. And I remember when we hit 10, double digits for the first time. We're taking the world by storm for Jesus. 10 people. And I remember the first time there was 100 people in our church. I remember it was our first anniversary. The week before, we had 99 people in church. And I remember I was going to count a pregnant woman twice and to hit the 100. And I'm like, you know what? We just leave it at 99. The next week was our first anniversary. We had 105 people. And I remember the first time that we hit 1,000 in our church. And I remember the first time we hit 2,000. And I remember this past Easter, just whatever, a month and a half ago, over the course of Easter weekend, there were 5,000 people here at Calvary, which is amazing, which says a lot more about you than it does about me, by the way. Because you guys are the ones that are investing in your friends and inviting your family members, and they're seeing your life, and they're saying, wherever you're going, if it's causing a change in your life, then I want to be part of it. So that says a lot about you. But here's the thing that happens, right? And so I think about this, that there's gonna be a man who shows up when I step off the scene, and you know what he's going to inherit? He's going to inherit buildings. He's going to inherit property. He's going to inherit a large congregation that he did not work for, that he did not struggle for. And what can happen is, and this is sometimes, and when I'm not at my most spiritual, which happens, sometimes I think about this, like, what if the next pastor of this church is a complete idiot? And what if he just starts making terrible decisions and he destroys everything that was built? And that so many of us who have been around here for so long, that all the sacrifices will have been in vain. And this is the road that Solomon is going on. And this is the road that we can go on if we think that this is the only option. But here's the reality. Solomon had a son named Rehoboam that he knew was going to be king. And what he could have done is spend some time investing in him, teaching him how to be a wise leader. The problem was it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. His son Rehoboam did turn out to be an idiot and did turn out to destroy everything that was built. And here's the challenge that we have, is that sometimes we think that the key to the future is simply preserving, making it just an extension of the past. When the reality is what we have to do is honor the past, but be loyal to the future. That there sometimes are things to be done that are a little different than how we've done them before. And that doesn't make them wrong, it just makes them different. And that Solomon, looking at his son, saying, yeah, but nothing can be done better than me. How do you know that? That could have been said of your father David, who was the greatest king of Israel, and yet somehow you found a way to rule different and do even more than your father had done. You see, and this is the challenge that we have, is that we have to find purpose beyond what people think is supposed to happen, right? We got to find it beyond expectations, that there are expectations that people put on us, that sometimes we put on ourselves, that we think this is how I'm supposed to be, and this is how things are supposed to go. And listen, what you've got to do is start living for an audience of one. What is God calling you to do? So I have this thing that, so this is a while back. My kids are excellent swimmers. They took swimming lessons, and they're very good. And so my son, Xander, and my daughter, Mia, this is years ago, we would get in the pool, and they would race. And what would happen is that in the middle of racing, the two of them, and Mia is about 2.5 years older than Xander, and they would race, and they'd be pretty close to even about halfway through the race, except my son Xander would stop swimming and look around to see how his sister was doing, and that's when Mia would just blow him away. And then, what happens when you stop swimming? You start sinking. And so he would, and I would tell him, like, you got to stop looking around at where other people are to try to measure yourself. Well, how am I doing? And so, and we would talk about that over and over. So anyway, a couple weeks ago, before Noah's flood came to Florida, and so we're in the pool and we want to do some races. Now, I don't do what a lot of parents do. I don't let my kids win when we're playing stuff. I played chess with my 6-year-old daughter the other day and destroyed her. And I'm just straight up. I want my kids, when they beat me, for it to mean something. There are no participation trophies in the Franquist house. When you win, you earned it. And that's just how we roll. And so anyway, so we were swimming, and the kids wanted to do some races. And so we said, okay. So my son Xander and I are racing, and we get started, and we go. And the kids smoked me. I mean, like, by a full body length. And I'm like, all right, we race again. That was a fluke. We race again. And so anyway, then we raced again, and he won again. And then we raced again, and then he won a third time. And then I got out of the pool. My swimming is stupid. And so I just got out of the pool. And no, I didn't say that. But I did get out of the pool. And but here's the thing that happens, is that what can happen with us is that we can get so busy looking around and trying to compare ourselves with the expectations that we have, or just with, well, how am I doing based on how they're doing? We got to forget that and start living for an audience of one and start swimming as hard as we can, as much as we can, for as long as we can, and let all of the things that, people are going to say be said, because it doesn't matter, because we don't arrive our approval or our validation from other people. We get our validation and approval from the God who created us, the one who gives us purpose and meaning and tells us his will and tells us what he wants to do. Well, lastly, verse 24, and then we'll wrap it up. It says, nothing is better for a man than that he should eat and drink, that his soul should enjoy good in his labor. This also I saw was from the hand of God. For who can eat or who can have enjoyment more than I? For God gives wisdom and knowledge and joy to a man who is good in his sight. But to the sinner he gives the work of gathering and collecting, that he may give to him who is good before God. This also is vanity and grasping for the wind. Lastly, I need to find contentment beyond the temporal. Contentment beyond the temporal. Solomon starts giving us a little sneak peek as to where he's going in his story. And he says that those who seek to please God experience the very things that Solomon was seeking: wisdom, knowledge, and joy. And listen, part of what happens is that the reason why we desire the things that we desire is because we've taken our eyes off of the one who can really bring meaning and fulfillment into our lives. Because sometimes those desires, that doesn't make them bad things. They just can't be ultimate things. That sometimes the things that we desire, the temporal things, it's really the thing behind it that causes us to really want. Listen, you don't really want a car. That's not the thing that's going to give you meaning. What you want is the thing that's behind it, what it represents. It represents freedom, youth, power, control. It's not that a big house, I have to have a huge house. No, but you want what the house represents. That it represents security and success and accomplishment and stature. The gadgets, it's not that you want the gadgets, but you want what the gadgets represent. This feeling of being relevant, being important, being wanted. You see, and if those things were actually things that satisfied, then we wouldn't want them anymore. But what they do is, because they don't ultimately satisfy, they just create a hunger for more. But see, those desires were meant to stir us up to a desire for another place, or more accurately, a desire for a person. That in the person of Jesus is where we find ultimate fulfillment. It's where we find ultimate meaning. It's where we find ultimate joy. Because all of the things that we think are going, the things that Solomon said, I indulged in all of these things, and I just came up, it was just vanity. But he says, but I found this, that when we do what God has called us to do, we find wisdom, we find knowledge, we find joy. All the things that we've been searching for all along. Let's pray together. And Lord, we want to thank you. Thank you for your work in us, for your love, for the fact that there is greater meaning, greater purpose, and greater joy that's found in you. And so we thank you for that. Help us, Lord, to draw closer to you more than anything or anyone else, because we need you more than anything and anyone else, because that is where purpose, meaning, fulfillment, and joy are found. And so we thank you for it. We thank you that it's possible through your Son, Jesus, in whose name we pray. Amen.
We hope you enjoyed today's message. If you decided to take your next step with God and follow Jesus, please visit mycalvary.com/begin. We have a free gift we'd love to give you. Also, please follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and also hit the subscribe button down below. From all of us here at Calvary, God bless you.